Quetzal says, I wanted to say that, yes. But how do you know this aphorism? It is well known to us from traditions. Billy says, from Henoch. I know. Quetzal says, then did either Semyaza or Petra report this to you, or perhaps Sfathor ask it? Billy says neither. Quetzal says that, I don't understand. Billy says it isn't important now. One day, though, you'll understand it. Let's talk about something else. Guido and I were talking about the prehistoric people, respectively the Stone Age people, and there, the question arose as to when these had actually come so far that they banded together in larger groups, and when these or their descendants built the first smaller and larger settlements, smaller or larger kraals or small villages, etc. In addition, we also came to speak of the first real, original prehistoric men, if one can actually designate the most distant, original forefathers of the Earth people as such. Here, the question, then, is how large they actually were and whether they were already walking upright. Also, we came to the first, respectively the leftover and subsequent animals, specifically speaking of the mammals that occupied the Earth after the extinction of the dinosaurs. The real interest was with the predators and the horses and even the large mammals and so on. What is also of interest to us is when the Earth's climate basically began to stabilize itself. Since these things also belong to one of your specialties, I guess that you can certainly tell us something about it. Quetzal says the Earth's climate began to stabilize itself around 35 million years ago. And if I should provide some information about mammals and also predators, which appeared about 65 million years ago after the Great Catastrophe, then I must speak of the times of the Eocene and Oligocene. As you know, the impact of a space projectile took place on the Earth about 65 million years ago, by what means all major life forms were killed and destroyed. Only small creatures were able to survive, which only weighed up to 10 or 12 kilograms at most. The first human forms, which can already be very well designated in their origin as human beings, emerged around 49 million years ago. Nevertheless, their appearance wasn't human but rather in the form that the Earth person knows of the early hominid, due to his conceptions, because the first human forms still had nothing comparable with these. In fact, these beings were only about 80 centimeters large, and they partially moved half upright on their legs, and their excessively long arms partially clambered around in the trees. The development of these beings lasted for a very long time, with the most diverse species following from it, which developed into actually recognizable humans in their first species, even the early hominids, as the Earth person imagines them in their early stages around 8.5 million years ago, while other species of the same genus appeared 4.5 and 6.5 million years ago. There were precursors to these species, but already 12.6 and 16.7 million years ago. From the more distant descendants of all these human forms, who appeared in various places on the Earth, such as in Africa, Australia, Japan, China, America, South America and in Europe, etc., as you now call these areas, there were already early accumulations of dwelling settlements, as you say, in which whole kinships gathered together. Such sites are known to us on Earth, and they exhibit an age of 736,000 and of 811,000, 970,000 and 1,200,000 years. Even after the dinosaurs, there were naturally predators that could have competed with the Tyrannosaurus rex. For example, there was, the family of hyenodonts, but these aren't the ancestors of today's hyenas, yet they were aggressive, powerful predators, whose most distant evolutionary altered descendants are the moles. A hyenodont reached a size of 170 to 180 centimeters, had a set of razor-sharp teeth, and especially the molars were razor-sharp grinding tools, with which even the thickest bones of victims could be easily crushed for digestion. The primitive genetic blueprint of these great predators has been preserved to this day in the mole, whose incisors come from the same evolutionary line as those of the hyenodonts. So today's mole is really nothing other than a predator, albeit a small predator that only eats worms, beetles, larvae, and so on. Hyenodonts, like the mole also is, were rogues. Hyenodonts were ruthless predators, but there were others that even surpassed these, namely the entelodonts, to which the endless savannas and hardwood forests offered abundant hunting grounds. These were actually the most powerful predators that lived at the same time with the hyenodonts, which disappeared even before the entelodonts. The entelodonts reached more than 2 meters in size and weighed more than 1,000 kilograms. These animals were extremely aggressive and exhibited an actual pre-kinship to today's wild boars living on the earth. They were omnivores and had no enemies except their own kind. Rogues, like the hyenodonts, met one another as a result of their distinct sense of smell, like also the hyenodonts, when other animals were seized or when cadavers showed them the way. This led to serious fights with their equals, which were frequently associated with severe and bone-shattering injuries, and which also often ended with subsequent death. It goes without saying that these powerful, great predators had no other natural enemies and, thus, were the actual rulers over all life forms at that time. Their only enemies were their own members of the same species. If they encountered each other, then they mutually attacked and maltreated themselves with their up to 1 meter long jaws, which were fitted with razor-sharp teeth. But at another time, there was also the Androsarchus, also an extremely aggressive predator that weighed well over a ton, and that was the earliest ancestor of today's sheep and also probably the largest predator that lived on the earth after the time of the dinosaurs. Nevertheless, this wasn't the largest animal, for that was the Reticulum, which exhibited a size of over 7 meters and a weight of up to 17 tons. This animal at that time was the real, first prototype, from which developed the rhinoceros that is well known to you. The most powerful and most unusual mammal appeared on the earth a little more than 2 million years ago, the Megatherium. This was a giant sloth that walked upright on its hind legs and ate leaves. Unlike today's sloths that live in trees and that are very slow and ponderous, the Megatherium was too immense and too heavy to be able to climb trees, like also the giant rodent that was the size of a modern cow, which lived 6 to 10 million years ago. Megatherium was as large as a medium-sized elephant, weighing over 4,000 kilograms and measuring 6 meters. Only a few thousand years ago, this giant sloth lived in North and South America, but it was hunted by humans for its great-tasting meat until it was wiped out, as this also happened with the mammoth, which was also largely eliminated by the humans at that time, while the remaining animals found their end through climatic upheavals and natural disasters. And since I speak now of the mammoth, you will surely ask about the elephants, respectively for their actual original forefathers. This was the Reticulum, which also lived millions of years ago and which developed, over a very long evolutionary process, into what you now know as the elephant. Billy says you forgot the horse. And how large, then, was the hyenodont? Quetzal says I have, in fact, forgotten this. But first, the hyenodont. This was about as large as a current rhinoceros. The original forefathers of horses were very small and only had a size of just less than 30 centimeters. Then, from these, the Chalicotherium developed at a later time, which was more than 3 meters in size and which had a short snout like an anteater, as well as a long neck. Therefore, with a little imagination, it could be compared to a giraffe. Billy says thank you for your remarks. Then now question about the so-called Roswell case. Did a UFO actually crash there? Even though you have already confirmed this once, there are still some things that remain unclear, even with regard to the UFO crew, concerning which you said that they were androids. So what were the occupants really, and from where did the aliens come? Quetzal says the Roswell case is a reality because the UFO crash actually took place there, but this is denied up to the present day and will continue to be denied in the distant future by the American military and secret services, as well as by all government agencies, namely with flimsy, changing,